You're listening to The Real Deal Podcast, Episode 3, for the week of April 17th through April 23rd, 2016.
Welcome back to The Man Addict for another episode of The Real Deal. I'm Kevin Polly.
And I'm Brian Hatcher.
And today we're going to be taking a look at some of the new films that hit the Hollywood box office this week, as well as just other news and cool stuff that you might like to know. So, Brian, we had some big releases this weekend.
Oh, yes.
And you and I both had a chance to see one of them, and you got a chance to see the other one, and I'm very excited to talk about these. The two films we're looking at are Disney's retelling, the live-action recreation of The Jungle Book, directed by Jon Favreau, and, of course, the third in the Barbershop series,
right.
Barbershop 3 coming out now. We have both of those to look at this week, so I'm very excited to take a look at these. We'll also be joined by Doc and Marty because, well, why wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
So anyway, we just got back last night. We saw The Late Show, and we saw the 3D version of Disney's new live-action reimagining of The Jungle Book. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, it was absolutely just a charming, fun adventure film. I mean, it really was a great film for the whole family to enjoy. And even if you don't have kids, we were there by ourselves, no kids with us, and we still had a great time.
Oh, certainly, we certainly did. It was a very, it's the nice thing about it is, of course, what a lot of people talk about is how technically advanced this thing is.
Yes.
Because you have all the CGI.
Right.
It's like pretty much the only real thing in the entire movie is the little boy.
Mowgli, yes.
Mowgli. But the thing about it is that about 2 minutes into the film, you're like, wow, this just looks amazing. And then after that 2-minute mark, you completely forget about the special effects. They all go to the side. You just kind of buy into it. You're not really thinking about, wow, I wonder how they did this. No, you're just so enwrapped in the story. And I think that's the best special effects. It's the ones that are not calling attention to them.
Right. You're right. Once you get used to it, it's almost like I can say the same thing about Avatar. The first time you see Avatar, you're on this foreign world, and there's gigantic, tall, blue people and stuff. But after you get acclimated to it, you just buy into it as just a world itself. And that's what I think this retelling of The Jungle Book did so well is, it has a great lead in Mowgli, our little adventurer. He is the man cub that everybody is involved with in some way, shape, or form. Whether they want to kill him or help him, they're in his life in some way, shape, or form. And I will say this, I think perhaps the greatest special effect in this movie was finding a kid who could carry the entire weight of the film on his little shoulders. And the little boy, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name, Neil Sethi, is just an absolute revelation. I mean, he not only looks just like the animated Mowgli. I mean, my God, that kid is like spitting image of him.
Right.
But he absolutely carries this film, and you realize that he is literally the only real thing in the film. Everything else is a special effect, whether it's the puppets that were stand-ins on set by Jim Henson's crew or the CGI characters. But he's there pretty much by himself, and he completely holds his own, and he completely carries the film beautifully. I was absolutely blown away by him, and like you and I were saying after when we saw it, if he doesn't work, this film will completely just collapse on itself. Because if you don't have a strong core in Mowgli, who is he is us, he is the person who takes us on this adventure. If he doesn't work, this film just fails. No technical wizardry in the world can carry a poor performance of your lead character, and luckily we don't have any danger of that in this film.
Yeah, and I mean he's acting to nothing for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
And that's tough for adult actors. But the fact that he sells you on this world. I mean, you do forget that these are CG characters. Right. You really buy into them.
Really, it's one of those things we were talking about. He's so good, and it really goes to show that Jon Favreau, as we've seen in Zathura and now this, he really knows how to work with kids. The kids in Zathura are fantastic. I mean, they're a real they really feel like how brothers act. You know what I mean? There's a real genuine sincerity to them. And with Mowgli, again, as you said, when he's interacting with these different creatures, you completely buy into the fact that they're there. I mean, he is making eye contact with Bagheera, or he's making eye contact, with Baloo, and you completely believe that there's a gigantic bear or a gigantic panther there that he is actually talking to. And that really, I mean, it blew me away how good he was in the film, how he plays the fun of the character, he plays the naivete of the character, he plays the strength of the character, his determination, and his courageousness. He really runs the gamut of emotion, and I mean, honestly, it's a very special performance from him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I love about this film is that we are at a place with technology that we can have these great scenes, but to a point where then it becomes invisible and the story takes over.
Yes. Absolutely. We have to talk about, obviously, the various voices that are cast in this film, because there are some very big names, and all of them deliver in every way, shape, and form. Of course, the two main characters who we see the most of, and it's based, you can go back to the original Disney cartoon, are Bagheera, the panther, and Baloo, the bear. Bagheera, done by Sir Ben Kingsley, who's just perfect for Bagheera. I mean, there's no one else you would cast in that role. He's absolutely perfect. And then Bill Murray as Baloo is because the original voice work of Baloo by Phil Harris is so magical. He really is everybody's favorite character, and it's just that warmth and the charm that comes of his voice. And so when you hear Bill Murray, you're like, well, is he going to phone it in? Is it going to be like Garfield, or are we going to get a real good Bill Murray performance? And I'm happy to say you get a really good Bill Murray performance. There really are emotional, arcs for his character, and he is very fun-loving, and he's a very great spirit. But at the same time, when push comes to shove, he steps up and does what he has to do to help Mowgli. And it's a really great characterization. And yes, you do get to hear the bare necessity. Yeah. And yes, it is Bill Murray and the little boy that plays Mowgli singing it. And yes, it's as magical as you think it would be.
I marked out for that so hard.
It's so charming. It is so utterly charming. And it's so sweet. And it's so great that, I mean, really, it's one of those moments I will just walk away with saying one of my favorite moments of the film, and will easily be one of my favorite little moments of film this year. It's so spot on. It was exactly what I wanted it to be and what I needed it to be. And I think everybody in the audience, I mean, I heard several people, just that laugh that you hear when something is just so awesome that you can't help but laugh at how awesome it is. Yeah. I heard that a lot, and it was genuinely right where it needed to be and very well deserved. So, of course, those two carry it beautifully. Now, Idris Elba as Shere Khan is a really great character. He's very intense, and he's not one note. And it's funny because in the original Jungle Book, the cartoon, Shere Khan just kind of shows up, and he wants to kill Mowgli. And, he has no way to know that Mowgli's there. He has no reason to really want to kill Mowgli other than he needs to move the story along.
Right.
And with this film, he's got a real genuine, backstory as to why he has issues with men and the red flowers, they refer to fire, and so he has a real genuine, a real believable hatred of man and all that man can be. He sees Mowgli as just the greatest threat, and just is why don't we go ahead and kill it now?
Oh, yeah.
And I really thought it was great that they gave him, he wasn't just a mustache-twirling villain, no pun intended, whiskers, I guess, but he is, he's layered. Yeah. I mean, he is a villain, yes, and he's very intense, yes, but he's not just one note, I'm going to kill you. I mean, he's subtle, and he sets things up, and he's very, very clever. And I was like, that's a really great little villain. I mean, not little, he's a big villain. He's a great villain, though, for this film. And I thought that he really, I mean, Idris Elba's voice work in this was really, really solid.
Oh, absolutely. And without being too spoilery, of course, you learn later on that Shere Khan has some personal issues with Mowgli and Jen. So that builds yet another layer to it. I mean, yes, he's a villain, but he's not like a one-dimensional villain.
And I'll tell you right now, I got a little like there's little chills on the back of my neck when he's telling that story about the cuckoo bird. And you'll know what I'm talking about when you see it, but I was like,
we don't want to say any more than that, but
that really kind of got to me. I was like, that's really friggin' intensely wrong, and then it makes perfect sense as to what he's saying, and you're like, yeah. It's genuinely unsettling. I was like, this is really cool. So he is a great villain for this piece. He's your main villain. Now, there are other villains that come into play, and we'll talk about those now. Scarlett Johansson as the voice of Kaa. Now, this was interesting because the original cartoon, of course, had the great Sterling Holloway, who was a phenomenal character actor. He popped up in all kinds of shows. I always recognized his voice from the Andy Griffith Show. He was on there a couple of times. And so that voice, every time I heard it, I immediately thought of the Andy Griffith Show.
Right.
So Kaa, of course, is a little more yes, he's crafty, but he's almost a little bit more bumbling in the original cartoon compared to this version of Ka, where it's a more seductive feel that Scarlett Johansson brings to it. Very sultry, very spooky. And when you see Ka, the way that she is realized on screen, she's gigantic. I mean, like, you have no idea how big this thing is until all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's part of the snake, that's part of the snake, that's part of the snake. My God, that's a big snake. Yeah. And she's very well animated. There's a sultriness to it. There's that hypnotic ability, of course, that we saw in the original cartoon, too, through the eyes. But the way it's done through this is really neat. And I was just really, like, seeing it in 3D, I was just as spellbound as Mowgli was. I was just like, man, where is this going? This is really cool. And, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the technical aspects, but the sound design during her scene in particular is really sinister and really creepy. And it's almost, there's that comfort level to her voice.
Oh, yeah.
But there's that underlying note of terror, almost like what's being set up here.
It's like, it's a snake.
Yeah.
It's a snake.
Don't trust it. You know what it is. But, man, she really delivers. And and if you stay through the credits, which I highly recommend, at least until the animation stuff that you see is done, she even has a song. Scarlett Johansson sings it, and it's very well done. And I wouldn't have minded if it had been in the film. And it's not in the context of the story, it's in credits, but it's really, really, really cool. Yeah. But when Ka finally shows her true self, I mean, it's creepy. I was like, eek, that thing is really intense. So there's, of course, another villainous type character. And then we get to... this will be... I swear, I put this on Facebook last night, and I stand by this. I don't know that I will see anything funnier this year. And this is a year that brought us Deadpool, and will bring us other great comedies. But I don't know that I'll see anything more like surreally funny and genius funny than Christopher Walken as King Louie. It is seriously the thing where I just started laughing from his introduction. And I won't spoil it, but let's just say if you're a fan of Saturday Night Live, there is a callback to that wonderful VH1 Behind the Music of Blue Oyster Cult. And I literally nearly peed my pants laughing at how funny that was. And then when you see King Louie, now he is gigantic in scale. I mean, he's really, like, he's huge.
If King Kong was an orangutan.
It was an orangutan, basically, yeah. I mean, he is like an ancient... creature. You get the feeling he's been around for a long time, and all the monkeys in that jungle, every one of them, go to him as their main god.
And no kidding.
No kidding. You're really, literally every monkey in the jungle reports to King Louie. Now, the great thing about
this... And you see why.
You see why. Yeah, he's a big dude. What's great, though, is it's like Jon Favreau said, okay, Christopher Walken, how would you play a giant orangutan who is like a mob boss? And I could just hear Christopher Walken be like, I'd play him like me. Yes. Go make this as Christopher Walken a monkey as you can make it. And it is absolutely breathtakingly funny. And then you get to hear Christopher Walken in all of his Christopher Walken monkey glory. He actually does sing I Want to Be Like You. Oh. And I literally just marked out in the theater. I mean, I literally was like almost coughing up a lung. I was laughing so hard at the sheer brilliance of what I was seeing. It's almost surreal. You just, like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, my God, Christopher Walken is really singing I Want to Be Like You. And he's literally going, ooh, 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 I want to be like you, ooh, ooh. And I'm like, this is really happening. And I could not stop smiling.
Oh.
I swear to you, I don't think I've laughed that hard at something like that in a long time. I mean, it hurt me. I was laughing so hard. I hadn't laughed and hurt that hard since I think, and don't judge me on this because I think it's a funny film. If you don't, so be it. But since I saw Mars Attacks, Mars Attacks, I had a headache. I was laughing so hard at Mars Attacks. And it's that kind of surreal, goofy, funny that you're like, I can't believe this is happening. And at the same time, once that scene progresses, there's an intensity to it. Like, his King Louie is, like, pretty freaking scary. I mean, like, he's kind of like the cave troll in Lord of the Rings scary. Like, he pops up in places you don't expect him to. And he's really cool. The whole time that scene goes down, I just remember thinking in my head, there's going to be a Disney attraction for this. And it's going to be one of those, like, 3D things where it's like the animated stuff, and you're going to have to escape from King Louie. I can totally see that happening. And it would be totally lost. It's a really, really fun scene. So there's, like, your main voice work. Then you also have, of course, the wolves. Giancarlo Esposito as the father wolf, and Lupita, I'm going to butcher her last name, Nyong'o, I guess. Again, I'm sure I'm totally wrong on it. But of course, we know her from most recently from Star Wars: Force Awakens as Maz. And she just, as much as she delivered a great voice character in Star Wars: Force Awakens, and she's great in that movie. My gosh, her mother Wolf is such a wonderful character. Like, you just want to hug her.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she's so beautiful. She's so beautifully animated, and she's such a wonderful maternal character. And the way that she does not look at Mowgli as anything more than her son. She is really the heart of the film. And boy, she's just great. And all of her little pups are cute, and they're great. I mean, there's a lot of cute animals in this. And then we do get to hear the last voice work of the late, great Gary Shandling. Baloo has some buddies in the jungle that are, I mean, I just laughed the entire time. And there's a scene with bees, and you'll know it when you see it, that everybody's like, well, the monkeys would have already quit by now, and he's talking about Mowgli. But the monkeys are already, every person that comes up, oh, you're trying that again, the monkey would have already quit by now. So it's just a really awesome little community of animals.
Yeah.
And that's what's really neat about this. There is a sequence with the whole water truce thing. And again, we're not going to get into all the story points. You need to see it for yourself, because this really is a great movie. As you can probably tell, we're both going to recommend this film.
Oh, yeah.
But there's this whole sequence of this big water truce where all of the animals of the jungle come together. And it's such a really neat moment. This film has shades of course, it has plenty of homages to the original Jungle Book, but there's also shades of homage to The Lion King and to Disney's Tarzan. And you'll know this when you see it. I mean, it's very obvious, but there is a wildebeest like stampede sequence, or a water buffalo stampede sequence, that's very much like if you were to make The Lion King real life, that's what it would have looked like. And I remember thinking, and I looked over to Brian, and when Mowgli was running, I was like, oh, Mowgli, this didn't end well for Simba's dad. Get out of there. it's that kind of thing. But there are some really cool little homages. The way that Mowgli moves through the trees on the branches and stuff will kind of remind you of Tarzan surfing and stuff in Tarzan. Not quite to that level, but it's very... there's an homage there, definitely. But this film really does work, and it has real heart. It has genuine humor. I mean, boy, it's funny. It's a genuinely funny movie. There are moments of action and suspense and intensity, but it never goes too far as being inappropriate for a family film.
Right.
As I always say, the perfect age for a Disney film is if you're old enough to buy a ticket, you're old enough to go to a Disney film, period. I mean, it's just Disney's one of those things. And this is definitely, much like Zootopia, they are 2 for 2 this year, not even getting into their Star Wars and Marvel stuff, just straight up on the Disney side. Between this and Zootopia, they will probably have 2 of my top 10 films of the year. I guarantee Zootopia will be there. Fairly certain the Jungle Book will be up there too. It's that good of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is I can see this being the definitive telling of the story.
Absolutely.
As much as I love the cartoon,
that's a great cartoon.
As much as I suspect in 2 years when Warner Brothers comes out and Andy Serkis comes out with his version of what they're going to call Jungle Book, as good as that's going to be.
And I'm sure it will be, because Andy Serkis has been. This is like a pet project, and I'm sure it'll be great.
I mean, this really just sets the bar.
It's going to be tough to beat.
I mean, this story is the way they tell this story. It's entertaining from beginning to end. It never drags. You're always interested.
Yes.
It is.
And it goes to show Jon Favreau really does have strong chops as a director.
Iron
Man was no fluke. Iron Man 2 was no fluke. Chef was no fluke. I mean, he has really. Zathura was great. He's got a really strong track record as a director right now. And this film, boy, it's going to make a lot of money. And it deserves to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I do want to just really quick talk on the technical aspects of it. We saw this in 3D, and I can honestly say this is a film that I would tell you is worth the upcharge if you like seeing things in 3D. I would own it in 3D, because in the home theater setting, 3D is so much brighter and crisper. I can only imagine how it's going to look when I get to watch it here in the Man Attic. Very exciting to me. But not only on the visuals, but man, the sound field of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
The minute you see the Disney castle and you start, it literally pulls you back into the jungle. You're suddenly just in the jungle.
Yeah.
The sound field just lights up. And I mean, it is absolutely like, you feel like you are right there in the midst of the deep, dark jungle. And it's absolutely just amazing. This film will definitely be nominated for Best Sound. There's no doubt in my mind. And other than like maybe a big special effects film like a Star Wars or Captain America Civil War or something like that beating it, it would definitely be up there for me as just some of the best sound I've heard in a movie in a long time. It's very enveloping. And it's always like you really get the space, the geography of the jungle. There's echoes and there's birds chirping and monkeys and all. And it's just always active. It just really draws you into the film.
And like I said before, you have I mean, technically, you're basically looking at a movie where the boy is the only real thing on the screen. But honestly, everything there is real.
Yes,
it's
real.
Very real. It is real in every way that counts.
Yes,
and I mean, it's a living, breathing organism.
Yes,
this entire movie that envelops you, and you're within. I mean, it's just you story. Superlative, and I mean, it just captures you right from the beginning and carries you along. To me, it's nearly a perfect movie for me.
For what you'd want it to be, yes.
Yeah, and as somebody who's not the biggest fan of 3D, when it's done well, I think it's fantastic. This is definitely a movie worth seeing in 3D.
I would agree completely. Now, again, if you're a big fan of the original cartoon, you will see plenty of homages, including the final scene. You will see the book from the original film, and it was a really charming moment. And I literally said out loud, "Well played." It's a really nice just cap off to the book, into the movie. I mean, it's just a very charming film. So, as we wrap up the discussion on this, Brian, do you recommend it? And do you recommend it in 3D?
Let me think about that for a moment. Yes, I do.
There you go. I also will second that. Seriously, whether you have kids or not, I cannot imagine anyone with a soul going in and not enjoying this movie. It's fun, it's charming, it's action-packed, it's beautifully realized, both through the visuals and through the audio, and especially through young Neil Secchi, our Mowgli. He's so great. I mean, really, really strong performance.
And I know it's early to even say this, but it would not surprise me if young Neil got an Oscar nod.
I wouldn't be shocked, at least on the Golden Globe. I mean, really, truly, he is.
He's amazing.
He really carries the film.
Amazing.
He is a total little stud. His Mowgli is a great hero.
Wow.
And I'm going to say it right now, like any kid who would go see this, boy, he will be their hero.
Yeah.
And boy, they will really live through this. They will live this film vicariously through him. And he's a great conduit for kids to get into this movie. When he's scared, they'll be scared. When he's happy, they'll be happy. They'll feel it with him. I will guarantee it. And I can guarantee this because I felt it with him, and I think Brian will say the same thing.
Absolutely.
You feel it with him, and boy, it's a very, very well done film. Hats off to Jon Favreau, hats off to the crew, hats off to the cast, and hats off to Disney for really putting together a film that is not just a greatest hits compilation, that really is its own thing, but still faithful to the material that people know and love from Disney and to the books of Rudyard Kipling. But again, a film that anybody can enjoy. I don't care how old you are. Yeah. Really one of the perfect examples of a Disney film.
Yes.
When you think of Disney, this would be a great film to put up there with it. And again, from the animation side, when you look at the films they put out lately, the Zootopia, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, of course, was a humongous hit, and then, no, sorry, not Inside Out, that's Pixar. I was just thinking of it the other day, and I went to look at it a second here. Hang on a second. What was I just thinking of? All my Disney films. Oh, Big Hero 6. Yeah. Which is getting an animated series next year, which is very exciting. My son cannot wait, and my son and me can't wait to see it. But these films have been really strong movies, and they've been great characters, filled with great characters, great action set pieces, great designs, and this film is no different. So really, again, on the Disney side, congrats to Disney. I believe it is the #1 film of the weekend. I don't think there was any question that it would be. And this is a film that will not surprise me if it has legs going well into the early part of summer. I could really see it carrying that far.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to see it again.
I really would. Yeah. And now that I've seen it and I can tell my son when I think the certain scary parts are, he'll be okay. Now, I will say this. This is one thing. The trailers are a little bit misleading. My son was actually very scared of seeing the movie because he thought it looked very serious and very dark. And the trailers really are a little bit misleading. I'm not saying that the film doesn't have moments of, again, intensity or spookiness, but it's still, at its heart, a Disney film. Just like any other film, there's those moments where there are certain things that might scare you or be a little intense, but they're not the whole film.
Right. And that's one thing is that kids do like to be scared.
They do. Yes, they do.
And so it's a PG film.
That's totally PG. Yeah.
But I wouldn't have a problem with it with a child.
No, not at all. If the kids were in the theater when we saw it, all loved it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so definitely worth the time. Now, the other big film this weekend, and we talked about it last week, and I said, if you remember in our podcast, I said, I guarantee this will make money. And that's the third Barbershop film.
Right.
And, of course, they've brought back everybody. Ice Cube, Cedric the Entertainer, Common, and everybody's back. Now, you had a chance to see this. Unfortunately, my schedule this weekend did not allow me to because I had a heart walk and stuff yesterday. But what did you think of it? Because I've always enjoyed the first two very much. Mm-hmm. So how does this one stack up with the other two?
I really do enjoy. I really did enjoy the film. There was a lot of great stuff in there. The thing about the movie is, I mean, it's a comedy, absolutely.
Of course.
But it goes a little bit deeper. I mean, you start out at the beginning, you have Ice Cube's narration, and you see these scenes in New York, and he's talking about Chicago. I'm sorry. And he's talking about Chicago, and he's like how much he loves Chicago, and he's a part of Chicago, but sometimes Chicago can be a little different, you know? And he's like, sometimes I don't recognize you anymore. And the movie, again, it's a comedy, but there's a thread running through this. He and Rashad, who's played by Common, they both have sons. They're getting in trouble in school. They're kind of relating with gangs. There's a lot of the shop is in South Side of Chicago. There's a lot of gang violence. So there's that theme of dealing with your neighborhood but being a parent and saying, you know, I love this neighborhood, but you know, I got to think about what's best for my kid. So Calvin's having to make some choices that may not be popular. It's things that he's kind of second guessing, but he's like, you know, he loves his son.
Right.
And it's like, how am I going to deal with this situation? Now, I can see where some critics might say, oh, this is supposed to be a comedy, and they're getting too political, and they're talking about, you know, political themes, you know, it's not entertainment, you know, and I don't have a problem with that. Sometimes entertainment should...
If it makes sense and it fits the story well,
and it certainly does, and it certainly does here.
And we see in the news all the time, the Southside Chicago does have these issues.
Yeah.
So why not sometimes? I mean, and comedy can do this well.
Yeah.
Hold up the mirror a little bit. Yeah, we can kind of laugh at ourselves, but we need to realize these are real things, and if we don't address them in some way, then we might as well just be sweeping them under a rug and letting them happen.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, the barbershop is like one of the best. It's a great sort of a framing device to explore these things, because you have people in the shop talking about these things, and they don't always agree, and you kind of get both sides. But it's not just about gang violence they talk about. They talk about relationships between men and women. And
well, if you think about it, the other two films, the barbershop was always like their little microcosm of the world. And so you get a little bit of everything. And in real life, that's how barbershops work.
Yes.
You know, I mean, really, that's where guys go to tell tall tales and talk about what's going on. And it's like almost like a bar without the alcohol. You know what I mean? Like, it's really
because they have the beauty parlor on the other side of the shop, you get the other side of it as well. And it's extremely entertaining. For me, since I'm a little bit older, you know, there was a little piece of this movie that I found interesting that maybe younger viewers wouldn't get, and that's that you have Ice Cube and Common playing these really good friends. They have issues with each other, but they're really good friends, and they both have sons, and they support each other. You know, younger people might not remember the 90s that I do, and remember in the mid-90s when Common and Ice Cube were going at each other on an album. Yeah, they had huge beef back in the day, and you know, remembering that and seeing them on the screen, you know, like brothers, you know, it's like, you know, that was, in a sense, I was like, I remember.
Yeah.
It was like, back then, I would have never expected this, that they could put their beef aside, because it was vicious. It was vicious when they were going at each other. But that they have gone, and it makes perfect sense in the context of this film, of basically these two men who are now a little bit older, you know, and have concerns outside of themselves now.
Yeah.
And
older and wiser.
Definitely older and wiser. And like I said, certainly a funny film, but it goes deeper. And
now, looking at this film, I've always been amazed at how Ice Cube was able to go from being, you know, one of the great rappers of all time, especially of his time, to being a totally believable and totally fantastic actor, especially on the comedic side. Dude's got chops.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, go back and look like Friday, and look, of course, the first two barbershops. He's a funny guy. And my God, the 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street, he might be my favorite thing in the two films. He's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He's such a naturally funny guy. I mean, he just really gets it. How is he in this film compared to the other two?
Well, you know, he's a very funny guy, but he's also, there's also a lot of drama in this movie that he's completely able to carry through in this film. I mean, I mean, he plays both sides, the comedy and the drama, and he's great. He's absolutely, but he's been great for a long time.
He really has been, honestly.
You know.
I mean, he's such a, and it's so funny that there's a generation of people that know him as like a performer.
Yeah.
Like my parents, of course, were never into rap music, but they know Ice Cube as that actor guy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that's what's so funny, that he's been able to transcend.
Yeah.
That you can know him from the music world, you can know him from the film world, and they both. I mean, they're both equally awesome, versions of him. You know?
Well, I mean, of course, the first time I saw him on screen was, Boys in the Hood, and I mean, even then,
that's a very raw film too, and he was at that stage in his career, like that was the perfect, the perfect storm.
And it's interesting to kind of compare that film with this third Barbershop film, because in a sense he is, he's a younger he was younger then,
right?
He's older now, and you can see where his views kind of shifted a little, not just as a character,
sure.
Because the thing is, it was like 10 years ago since the last one.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's close to 10. I think 10 years, and I mean, you can see how that character has changed. And I think as Ice Cube has changed, because he has learned. He's lived life, and it's again seeing Ice Cube as as Calvin, with a little bit of age on him.
Yes,
it's a different. I mean, it really is more than just a comedy.
Right.
It's not. It's a lot more going on.
And the thing is, again, I don't mind a comedy having a conscience. I really don't. If it fits in with the mood of the film and the tone of the film, I'm fine with that. I mean, it really does not bother me. I mean, if you think about it too, just looking at it in just black cinema history, in the 70s when you had films like Car Wash, Car Wash is a very funny film. But there's a lot talking about as far as racism in the nation at that time. And a lot of times that was the thing that is so strong about black cinema, whether it's the action films or the dramas or even the comedies, is that they were very much a product of society. Mm-hmm. They were, in essence, a way for even like me, as a white kid growing up in St. Albans, West Virginia, to understand a little bit more about culture and about history even in America, as how those things happen. I mean, and that's when I think, when you told me about this with Barbershop, I'm like, well, that just seems like right in line with the grand history of especially of black cinema and comedy in black cinema from like the late 60s till now. I think that it just feels like a natural product of that, and that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Because to me, that's the great thing about with like Ice Cube, where he has lived this kind of lifestyle. I mean, through his times back in the day with NWA, and I'm sure for him, Boys in the Hood was kind of like almost too close to home. But now where he is a parent, where his son has now played him in Straight Outta Compton, I mean, he has overcome a lot of things, and now, I mean, I figure in a lot of ways, I'd say that his character of Calvin is almost like autobiographical for him to play that role.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I certainly feel that way. And, I mean, Ice Cube was just great in this role.
He's just awesome.
Absolutely.
He really is. He's one of those guys that every time he's on screen or you get to hear him in a song, I mean, there's just an energy that comes from him. There's an electricity there that not everybody has.
Yeah, because there's a verisimilitude to it. I mean, he's absolutely true. And I think if there's any shame to this film, I mean, if there's anything that I think is that disappoints me, and it's not about the film, but I think it's maybe attitude of moviegoers, is that, especially white moviegoers, where if you're looking at a movie with a predominant male black cast, that you just immediately just assume, well, this is not a movie that's going to speak to me.
Right. And
I hope that maybe some people might kind of put that aside and definitely check out what I think is a really fantastic movie. I mean, well, certainly
same argument with Straight Outta Compton. A lot of people are like, well, gosh, I wouldn't want to see that because, well, I didn't like that music, and I'm not, if I'm white and I'm just, suburban white kid, that's not my kind of movie. And I'm like, no, it's a human story. Right. Therefore, it's for anybody.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
and I would certainly say the same thing about the third Barbershop movie. It's definitely a film worth catching. I don't care who you are.
I would say on a personal note, it's interesting for me how cool, where I work for the American Heart Association, Cedric the Entertainer and one of the actresses, now I can't remember which one it was, they actually did some commercials for the American Heart Association for our blood pressure checks based off of the new stuff from Barbershop. So it actually debuted this weekend with the film coming out this weekend too. Nice. So I love the fact that there's even another level of social conscience for this film. Not just what's going on in the film, but even just their responsibility to just the society in general. I really dig that. And I think, to me, that's why I love seeing these films succeed. And that's why I knew when I heard the film was coming out, I'm like, yeah, that film's going to make bank. Yeah. It totally will. And that's why I was glad Straight Outta Compton did so well. Not only critically, but also commercially.
Right.
Because I'm really hoping that Hollywood will kind of cease with the whitewashing and remember that everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a cool story to tell. And if you continue down this path of whitewashing it, then it's kind of like you literally take so many great components of what's going on in cinema right now, and you just silence those voices or just shut them out, and that's just not right. It really bothers me. So, not trying to get too political here, but I mean it's definitely something that is an issue. I mean, we saw it this past Academy Awards. A lot of people had issue with the fact that so many. I mean, all the top performance awards had no minorities at all. Yeah. And that's kind of wrong, because I know there were some great performances out there that should have been looked at. Hell, the cast from Straight Outta Compton should have been looked at. Period. So, again, I'm glad that you got to see it, and I'm glad, that it struck a chord as a film, not only from a funny side, but also having a little bit of a social conscience as well. And again, that doesn't bother me if it makes sense in the context of the story. And it certainly does. It really does. It sounds like in this case. So that's really, really awesome. So, to those listening, would you recommend Barbershop?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then that's 2 in a row then that we've had. This is a good weekend for film.
Yeah, I feel better now. It's like, hey, I was just like...
last weekend you didn't like anything, so this weekend you like them both. That's great. Yeah.
Stick around long enough, something will come up,
Well, one of the other things, of course, we'll look at, of course, our news and stuff. We'll talk about that here. I do find it interesting, of course. We've seen this week. We saw a lot of the initial reviews for Captain America: Civil War, and the fact that it's sitting at a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with like nearly 20 reviews, is really that really caught my eye. I'm like, man, this is almost the opposite of what we saw with Batman v Superman, where it seemed like right out the gates there was this sort of critical backlash on it. Right, and it's really interesting to see how with this film the reviews I'm reading, I mean, from heavy hitters like Empire Magazine and even like Forbes magazine said that it could quite possibly be the greatest comic book movie of all time. And of course, I'm like, well, that gets my ears perked up, because for me, I mean, that's Captain America: Winter Soldier. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I mean, looking at, let's go and take a look at some of the news items and stuff. Yeah. This week in the box office, we see that Batman v Superman is the number 4 spot.
Yeah,
and this is only its 4th week in release.
Well, the thing about it, and again, I don't want to make... I'm not going to sit here and bash Batman v Superman again. I'm sure people are tired of hearing about it. But to be honest, I mean, the new Captain America movie is going to... I mean, it certainly looks like it's going to do very well.
Oh, yeah.
And to be honest, Warner Brothers, with a $5 billion budget, could not have made that film. And has nothing to do with talent. It has nothing to do with these characters. They've just had almost 10 years to build a story. I mean, if there's anything I can say to Warner Brothers, I'm sure they're not listening to me right now, but take your time.
Yeah.
You're behind. Yeah.
Now, at least we did get one good piece of news this week, though, and that is they officially greenlit the Ben Affleck directed Batman solo film, which is what I've been waiting for. After seeing Batman v Superman, as we said in the podcast, see it for the promise. The promise is starting to happen. So, man, I'm telling you, that gets me super excited. Right. That Ben Affleck directed flick. And apparently Jeff Johns working on the screenplay. So I'm like, whoa, now that's pretty big news.
Yeah, I mean...
The two of them will make a killer film.
Absolutely. They just need to take their time and build a franchise. Yeah. You don't get to cut in the front of the line.
No,
and I think,
exactly right.
I think maybe Warner Brothers is learning that, and if they can, and just build on what they,
It'll be interesting to see what Suicide Squad does for them this summer, guys, for sure.
No, absolutely.
Well, let's get into the news here and see what we got to talk about.
Oh, this is one item. When I heard about it this week, I knew I wanted to talk to you about this. In a Variety interview published April 14th, AMC Entertainment CEO Adam Aron stated he would be open to allowing people to text and use their mobile devices during movies. Although this move was intended to attract more millennials to their theaters, it was a plan no one seemed to like, millennials included. After the internet exploded over the announcement, AMC announced mere hours later that they would maintain their cell phone ban in theaters.
Now, if you're here in the Man Attic, on this wall that you can't see, I have a cool wall graphic that says, "Welcome to our home theater." please turn off your mobile device. Because, my God, nothing upsets me more than being in a movie, especially in a 3D film, and seeing some jackass's cell phone light come on because they're texting people or taking a call, and it does interfere with your vision. I mean, it takes you out of the moment. And I don't pay good money to go to a movie to listen to some jackass talk on their phone, or watch them text on their phone, or Snapchat, or whatever. And this is not me being like, oh, Kevin, you're just an old man. No, not at all. I love my phone. My God, I love my phone. But I love going to the movies, and it's part of that symbiotic experience of being there in a room together and experiencing a film. I don't care about what you're doing on your phone. I really, truly don't care. Just turn it the F off and enjoy the movie.
I will tell you this. If I were a movie studio, and AMC would have passed this. I don't care if they put somebody off put them out in the corner or whatever, or they have special showings where you can text.
I think I heard they were going to try to actually have designated theaters, Theater 6 will be the texting theater.
But I will tell you this, and this is something that I didn't see in any of the reports, but just something that occurred to me. If I were a movie studio, and AMC had gone ahead with this plan, I would not allow my movies to be shown in their theater. And it's not just because it ruins the movie experience, but something that I didn't notice anybody talking about, but I think is also a valid point to this. And allow me to make this point. I'm going to pull out a cell phone. Okay? This is a cell phone. See, now this is a screen. You can use this screen to text. You can use it to play games. And you can, believe it or not, you can actually use it to make phone calls.
I know, believe it or not, you can call with your phone. It's
now,
a weird thing,
this is the important part, okay? Pay attention, because this is where it's important, okay? Now, this is a camera. You can use this to take selfies. You can use it to take videos of your nephew's birthday party, and you can also use it to record movies.
Yep.
They're not allowing texting. They're allowing pirating, is what they're doing. And it's ridiculous. I mean, you're going to let people take their phones out? They're going to be filming the movie.
I guarantee
you. And these things take 4K video, and it only takes you for about 2.5 hours of filming is about 50 gig.
Yeah, you could put in a memory card and do it.
You could put a memory card, and some phones have
that much memory. Yeah,
that and more.
Yeah,
it would have been stupid to do that, because you are allowing pirating. Because what's somebody going to do? You're going to walk? No, they're just texting. And the thing was, they said, well, this is going to, we won't have to have, ushers in there telling people to turn their phones off. Well, if you don't have ushers doing that, you're not going to have ushers catching people filming your movie in 4K and putting it out on the internet. If I'm the if I'm the studio, I'm not going to send my films to AMC so they get pirated.
Nope.
It was a bad idea beginning to end.
Oh yeah, and you're right. No one was talking about that, but I guarantee if it would have happened, the studios would have been like, hey, guess what movie you're not showing? You're not showing mine.
Exactly. Yeah. It was just a badly conceived idea from start to finish. And if there's any benefit to the internet, it was the fact that AMC right away was like, this isn't going to work.
Yep.
So
and it wouldn't.
And it wouldn't have. And like I said, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, it was bad for all kinds of reasons. But I mean, thank goodness I will be able to go to an AMC theater in the future. Now, this is going to be a big item that I had to break up into pieces because CinemaCon, the National Association of Theater Owners Convention and Trade Show, was held this week at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. And of course, there was a ton of stuff mentioned. There was a great deal of new technology discussed, such as higher res and faster frame rate films, new immersive sound systems, laser projectors, and even this system that uses wind and mist generators, vibrating, moving seats, spits out
like
water.
Park experience.
Yeah, spits out water, and they called it 4DX 4D. I mean, sight, sound, fog, bubble machine. I mean, it's like everything. Now, although the new tech sounds like it will improve the theater-going experience and help alleviate the problems that theaters have been having with greater competition from the home theater market, Arts Alliance Media CTO Rich Phillips warns that the lack of standard format has been a nightmare so far for film studios and theaters, and that this problem is only going to get worse as we have all these all these wonderful full immersion screens and all these bells and whistles has made it very difficult for theaters now to come up with a standard. Right now, they're having to come up with so many different standards when they release a film to get it out in the theaters, and it seems them not having a standard right now is making things very difficult for them.
Well, and it's a good point. You're looking at the home theater standpoint. I mean, now you have home theater systems where you can get 4K televisions, and they're now putting more films out in 4K. You've now got Dolby Atmos, which actually uses sound speakers in your ceiling, or special speakers on the ground that bounce the sound off the ceiling. But you've now got that available in the home format.
Right.
So you've really got, I mean, they really do. I understand the need to try to draw people out to get them out there. Honestly, for me, what you should focus on is just making the experience just better.
Yeah.
You know, making sure that you don't have people ruining it with their cell phones. You know, maybe look at concession prices a little bit because a family of four can't afford to buy their 4 tickets and then go spend another $60 on snacks. You know, there are certain things they can look at and tweak that would just make the general experience better versus needing laser projections and fog and mist. I'm not going to Universal Studios. I'm not going to Disney. I just want to go enjoy a film. I'm not saying I wouldn't find those things neat, but I wouldn't want that all the time. I mean, there are certain films you wouldn't need it. And then for those films, it becomes a nightmare of formatting it for a theater that's not going to have all the bells and whistles working in. There's just a lot of things you have to take into consideration. I think, to me, just make the general experience as great as it can be. Focus on the visuals and the audio. You know, make that experience great. More comfortable seats. You know, things like that. Thinking about it from just the theater standpoint versus adding in the theme park attraction stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about it is, especially when stuff like this is going to cost your ticket price.
Your ticket price is going to shoot up with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they're already expensive as it is.
Absolutely, because again, these theaters are having to keep up with this technology. There comes a point where it becomes way too expensive to go to a movie.
I mean, you're looking at a film like that. I almost guarantee in certain cities you're paying probably $30 a ticket for one movie.
36.
36. Yeah.
36
Guaranteed.
for one of these theaters.
Yeah.
And
now for a family of 4,
well, it's not going to happen.
that's basically like $150 for you to walk at the door.
Exactly.
And do that. I mean, that's crazy.
And the thing is, the theater experience. What they need to do with the theater experience is remind people. And I've said this forever. Watching a comedy or a horror film at home by yourself is like watching a 3D movie without the glasses.
It really is. I agree.
I mean, the best place to watch a horror movie or to watch a comedy is in a theater full of people.
You know, my favorite movie is Jaws.
Yeah.
And I can watch it at home anytime. But if I find out it's playing in a theater near me, you bet your ass I'm there.
Yeah.
Because every single time, the experience of being in a theater full of people, either those who know the film and especially those who don't. That is, for me, where the true joy of going to the movies comes to life. Man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly it.
Oh, yeah. How many times have we sat in the theater? It's like, Ben Gardner's going to make them piss their pants in 3,
Yep.
2, 1.
The shark jumping up when he's like, chumming the stuff. I mean, it's always, there are certain beats in that film that I can always guarantee will get a rise. And again, that's the joy of rewatching that film. It's almost like rediscovering it every time. That to me is the power of seeing a movie in the theater. One of the best experiences I ever had was The Ring when it first came out back in, it was 2000. But my gosh, that was the most primed live audience. There was the whole front third of the theater was teenage girls. And as soon as I sat down, I was like, all right, this is going to be a fun bunch. Let's do it. Bring it on.
Yes.
And by God, it was one of the most awesome experiences I've had watching a film. I mean, it was great. And that, to me, is, again, I can't experience that at home.
No, you can't.
And it takes away from that experience if people are there too busy texting and not paying attention. They're going to miss Ben Gardner's head popping out, or they're going to miss, Samara coming out of the TV because they're too busy doing other crap.
Right.
It's those things you have to, it's again, that's the experience. That is what I'm paying for when I go to the movies. Yes. That is what not just the new film and seeing it right now, but it's that communal experience.
Right.
That's where the real joy of it comes from. Seeing The Force Awakens on opening night with a theater full of Star Wars nerds.
Yeah.
It was just a wonderful film. We were so excited for this movie, and that feeling, you could almost cut it with a knife. There was so much excitement and tension in the room. Was it going to be good? Was it not? We don't know.
Right.
And it was such a great feeling. And I just, that's what I miss about the flashback series at Park Place, when they used to do that all the time. Going in and seeing those classic films, man, the films that we grew up with, with a theater full of people who are just as excited as you are to be there.
Right.
It's a dynamic that cannot be duplicated. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's like a drug for me.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
really.
know, $100,000 system and television and sound system will never be able to duplicate the energy of being in a theater full of people with you.
I completely agree, and again, it's like my heroin. I mean, really, it's such a great feeling. I mean, just that's what I love about the summer films coming out. You know you're going to be there with a crowd full of people, and they're going to be just as geeked about seeing that movie as you are, and that is the best feeling.
Yes,
it really is.
Absolutely. So, a bunch of announcements at CinemaCon. Here's a nice list. Let's start at the top. James Cameron announced that there will be 4 Avatar sequels.
Good Lord.
4 scheduled for 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Wow.
And then I can retire.
So don't die, James Cameron. Just skip the
gun.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, again, to me, that sort of shows that, everybody's looking at franchise now. They really are. Nobody releases one film anymore. They just don't.
No.
So, I mean, already...
But it's funny it's taken this long to get the sequel to Avatar when it was the highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
It's amazing that it's taken almost, again, about 10 years, since that came out. I mean, that's a long time ago.
I think under the circumstances they were saying... And the thing about it, too, is that James Cameron is selling this as for want of a better word, an Avatar cinematic universe. Mm-hmm. Is that these movies will relate to each other, but it's not going to be necessarily one narrative going all the way through.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, really, you can tell when you watch the original Avatar, I mean, there is a lot of research and development in creating the planets of Pandora. I mean, it has its own ecosystem. They created the flora and the fauna, and it's like a really neat universe. I mean, I can't hate on Avatar. Is it the most perfect film? No.
Yeah. And
does it deserve to be the highest grossing film of all time? No. But is it an entertaining film for me? Yeah, it's entertaining, and by God, at least gave me something I'd really never seen before.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that is where the excitement from those new films comes from, not seeing what else happens to the Na'vi that we know from that first film, but just more of just learning about that planet and how much more is going on there.
That planet and that world. And the world's surrounding it.
Yeah, that to me is what would get me back into the theater.
And of course, Warner Brothers did make the official announcement that there will be the standalone Batman film, and it was officially announced that Ben Affleck will be directing it as well as starring.
That's what I needed to hear.
Also, there's going to be a Deadpool 2.
Well, that was an obvious.
That
wouldn't tell you that after the credits. Come on, man. We
exactly.
That was coming. Yeah. That's just one of those yeah.
Well, yeah, that was like, oh, really?
Well, I mean, think about it. That film hasn't even hit the home video market yet. That film's going to sell Blu-rays for years, man. My God.
Well, the thing about it is, of course, the big running joke is that they want to have Keira Knightley as Cable. Let's see if they make that happen. That would be hilarious. That would be amazing. Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence will be starring in Passengers, a Sony Pictures hotly anticipated romantic sci-fi thriller directed by Imitation Games' Morton Tidham.
Oh, wow.
They showed like a lengthy trailer at this year's CinemaCon, so people are really excited about this.
I like both actors, and the director's a solid pick. I can't see that not being.
Yeah, they said the chemistry. They said the chemistry of Pratt and Lawrence on stage was just amazing.
Well, Star-Lord Mystique, man. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Expect to see a ton of new animation on the big screen in the near future. Not only are we going to have Finding Dory, Storks Sing, the Lego Batman movie, The Secret Lives of Pets, and Trolls to look forward to, Benedict Cumberbatch will voice the title character in Universal's 2017 animated remake of How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Oh,
Benedict Cumberbatch is the Grinch.
Perfect. Wow, he'll have that wonderful Boris Karloff feel. Wow, no, I got no issue with that, man.
No, that's going to.
I really don't. That could be money right there.
And there were a lot of announcements of different films, but basically, if I can sum up the film announcements. Basically, in a shocking departure, several studios have announced that instead of developing new properties, they would instead be focusing on filming sequels in previously successful movies or rebooting them altogether. Sarcasm ends here.
What? Surely you jest.
Okay. One little piece, final piece of CinemaCon news. Of course, makes you want to buy a theater so you can go and see all these things. Attendees were treated to several sneak peeks. They got to see, for example, like the first 27 minutes of Finding Dory.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's going to be fun.
However, a full screening. They were going to screen the entire film of Now You See Me Too. The screening was interrupted and the theater evacuated when an unattended backpack was discovered in the screening room. By the time they realized there wasn't anything in the backpack, it was too late to start the film back up. So they wound up missing out.
And that's one of the more, I think, anticipated films of the summer because no one expected the original film to be a big hit, and yet it did. I mean, that film had legs and made money for a good couple of weeks. And I enjoyed it. I mean, I wish there had been a little CG and more real practical magic, but it was a very entertaining film.
Oh, absolutely. And there was certainly for people who know the kind of the background.
Being a magician,
being a magician, there's a lot of
you gave me insight on some of the jokes. I'm like, oh, okay, well that does make more sense. And now I know why you laughed at it and I didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, when you're bringing in Harry Potter as the villain of your piece.
Yeah, and I kind of dig seeing what he'll do with it because I mean, really, he's such a good actor. I mean, like really, he's such a good actor. So Daniel Radcliffe has several shades of talent. I mean, he can be very funny. Mm-hmm. He can play the darker and more serious characters. He will be an interesting addition to that universe, by far. I think he'll be a lot of fun. One of the things we mentioned Cumberbatch, we need to talk about really quick, the Doctor Strange teaser trailer that dropped this week.
Well, that was actually my next thing.
Let's talk about that because I'm telling you right now, that trailer, I mean, like, man, my buddy Brian Hunt, who hopefully was watching this, as he said, it's like someone went into my head and said, what's the movie trailer I could make that'll make Brian Hunt want to go crazy and go to the movie? And they made that trailer. And it's really neat because I've watched people who... It's so funny that we live in a world now where you can watch someone watch something.
Oh, yeah, reaction videos.
And I was watching Angry Joe.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not familiar with the comics really at all, and he even says as much. And so for him, the trailer was kind of just more like head-scratching, and I'm like, I don't really know why I feel like, I don't know how I feel about this. Right. Whereas, of course, for me, this was probably one of my more anticipated films of the year.
Yeah.
That's not Captain America. And boy, I was just like, it's amazing. Like, I really am genuinely excited to see this film. I mean, I already was, but now I'm like, chomping at the bit to see it.
Yeah, and there were a lot of comparisons to Inception because again,
I get it because you got the whole city of things, and I get that. But it's like if you read the original comics, there's trippy designs like that.
Well, Steve Ditko and his design. I mean, there's a lot of just kind of weird stuff that goes on. And I mean, this is a teaser trailer. We are only getting the tip of the iceberg. Right. I'm really interested.
And you got to remember that they've got to put things in there that will make people say, "Oh, that looks like." Inception, or that feels like Batman Begins. Yeah. Because they've got to be able to make people relate to this character that they have no clue about. Yeah. To at least say, oh, that's interesting because it reminds me of this other film that I really liked. Now, to me, it's not the best teaser trailer I've ever seen or anything, but boy, it definitely did its job. It teased me. Yeah. And it definitely makes me want to see the film that much more. And I mean, I knew Cumberbatch was going to bring it. What was interesting is hearing him do a voice that's not his typical British tone.
Right.
Hearing him do a New York kind of accent was really interesting. I really dug that. And I'm like, I like that he's really getting into the character of Stephen Strange. It's not just going to be Sherlock with a cape.
Right.
There's a real character going on there, and that's very exciting to me. To me, this is a trailer that, if you're a fan of the comics, there's a lot of things to like.
Oh yeah,
like you saw.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm certainly looking forward to hearing more. Hopefully not necessarily seeing more.
Right.
Let's try not...
and I've been doing everything I can to avoid everything for Captain America.
I know. It just seems
I've watched the 2 trailers and that's it. I'm done. I'm not watching anything else.
There's just all these different scenes that are being released, and I'm like... I mean, in one sense, I kind of understand why they're doing it, but at the same time, I'm like... Don't give the movie away.
Don't give it away for free, man.
And don't do that. Don't spoil anything for me. I've done the same thing. I've done the same thing. I've said I don't want to see any of the trailers. There was another trailer though that was released this week that I found really interesting, which was Birth of a Nation. Have you seen it?
I have not had a chance to see that yet, and it's on my list of things to watch.
It is an amazing trailer.
Yeah.
And it's also, in some cases, a very difficult trailer to watch.
Sure.
Because, again, basically what it is it's about the Nat Turner Rebellion. Nat Turner was an African-American. He was a slave. Yep. He was a preacher. His sermons were used basically to placate, the slaves. And then after a while, he sort of flipped it, and then he used his sermons to to have this to cause the slaves to rise up. You
Yes.
know, and what's interesting, of course, is the name of the movie.
Yes, if you're familiar with the silent film by
the
Griffith.
1915
which
film.
is one of the most famous racist films ever
It's
made.
and a Hollywood film, and to name it the same thing. And when you see this trailer, I don't want to say too much
I will
about the
totally
trailer.
want. I cannot wait.
But there's this one scene. It's very subtle, but it's very disturbing, and it's just this little Southern girl stepping off her porch to go out and play in the yard, and she's holding this rope, and the rope is tied around the neck of this little black girl about her age, walking her off the porch like she was taking her dog for a walk, and you just see that and you go, ew.
Yeah.
You know, it's very. I mean, it's a very subtle, but you just that moment where you're like, wow, that happened, and
Yeah.
well, it did. It actually did. And, you know, with all the talk about how last year, you know, there really wasn't any good, you know, there wasn't any, you know, people of color nominated, no films in the Oscars. I mean, this is falling right in October. That's right in the heart of Oscar season.
For Oscar season, yeah.
Quite frankly, if this doesn't get at least one Oscar nod somewhere, Hollywood is racist. They're not going to explain this. Because, I mean, for what I've seen in the trailer so far, this film is, I mean, it's right in Oscar's wheelhouse. I mean, they're getting a slow pitch. If they want to, you know, this is obviously...
It's not just a slow pitch. They got a tee set up for them.
Exactly.
It
is obviously an Oscar, you know, an Oscar quality film. It certainly is. So let's see what happens. I would say
there are certain films you watch the trailer and you're like, this trailer is Oscar bait. This is exactly what.
And this, I mean, certainly this. And not to say that this film is. Isn't going to be good because
no. I'm just it's a statement that I was making. Like there's certain trailers, like watch the trailer for Steven Spielberg's Lincoln.
Yeah.
And boy, if that's not Oscar bait for Daniel Day-Lewis, I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely you know the most Oscar bait thing like ever. I mean, it's hilarious. But yeah, you do get that.
I mean, you certainly get, and certainly it's certainly worth a trailer worth watching. Although, like I say, in some places it's
not going to be a fun watch, but you do.
It's not going to be a fun watch, but it's going to be I think it's going to be an important film.
Sure,
absolutely. So, speaking of films, let's talk a little bit about the box office projections for this weekend. No surprise, the Jungle Book right on the top with $103,567,000.
That's a big opening.
Is
that just domestic?
That right now is just domestic.
Wow.
So, Barbershop came in a distant second, but still respectable at $20,210,000. Yeah. So, and I mean, the thing about it is, of course, it wound up showing in half the theaters.
Right, exactly. So you think if it would have had more exposure, it would have doubled those numbers. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah. The Boss comes in third, and this surprised me. At $10,170,000. I really thought that Batman v Superman might kind of
eke out above it. Yeah,
eke out above it, but no, they didn't. Batman v Superman $9,010,000.
Wow.
A 61% drop, you know, from their last weekend. I mean, this thing is plummeting. But Zootopia, number 5, $8,235,000.
Still kicking, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's still. It's absolutely still kicking.
And then Disney now has 2 of the top 10 films. I mean, that's crazy.
They do. The 6 through 10, Criminal, My Big Fat Greek Wedding,
which is still hanging in the top 10. I'm very impressed because that film got totally pummeled by the critics. So good for them.
God's Not Dead 2. Let's see. Miracles from Heaven. That's at 8. God's Not Dead 2 at 9, and Eye in the Sky at 10. Hardcore Henry plummeting.
It already dropped out of the top 10, yeah.
It's already at 11. So, Deadpool dropping a little bit to 14.
Still in the top 15.
But still making money. So, $906,000.
That's crazy.
Will this thing still be in theaters when the DVD comes out?
Very possible.
I really wonder, but we'll see. So, also, for finally, the weekend box office, there's only one new premiere next week that's going to open up nationally, which is The Huntsman Winter's War. Charlize Theron and Emily Blunt play 2 powerful Queen sisters prepare to wage all-out war with each other in this fairy tale beatdown of the ages. Chris Hemsworth reprises his role of the Huntsman from Snow White.
I think it's funny that Snow White and the Huntsman, and he had Kristen Stewart from Twilight as Snow White, and then we make the sequel, and there's no Snow White. It's
let's make it a prequel.
It's a prequel. I'm sorry, even still, there's no mention of Snow White. It's just,
no.
I was like, wow. That's just hilarious. She's completely removed from the film.
Well, sometimes
it's like everything else in that film worked, but Snow White. So let's just take out Snow White.
Well, she had some issues also.
Well, yeah,
but we don't need to.
Right? No, I didn't bring that up. But yeah, no, that would be interesting because the thing is, of course, what we've got next week is that. Yeah. And then at that point, you're 2 weeks away from Civil War. So I don't remember what else comes out the week after that. But this is like the last getting ready for the summer drop. May 6th will be D-Day for summer this year with Winter Soldier. Civil War. Right. And then, man, you think about the fact that in May you get both Civil War to start the month and then X-Men Apocalypse to close it out right there at the Memorial Day weekend. Man, that's a big month, and May really has become like that dropping, the mic moments really for the summer season. It used to be Memorial Day was what you kind of waited. Now it's the beginning.
Oh yeah, well, people aren't waiting anymore. And certainly we're showing. If Deadpool has done anything, said, hey. Yeah, you can stick a movie in February. If it's a good movie, people will come see it.
Yeah, Deadpool is still probably some of the best marketing I have ever seen for a movie. Yeah. The fact that they released it at Valentine's Day is it's sheer genius. It could have been an utter failure of infinite catastrophe, but no, it ended up being one of the single smartest moves in the current wave of comic book films. How do you bring people to the fold who don't really know the character? It's not your typical kind of comic book movie. It's way more juvenile and violent and ridiculous. How do you make that work, and get men and women who don't know it involved? You make it like almost a damn date movie. And it was just,
exactly.
It was perfect. It really was. So, what a trip that film still continues to move on like it has. Some pretty cool other things. One of the other things I'm very excited about, because of the cast, is that we've seen more cast members being unveiled for Blade Runner 2. Right. Being directed by Prisoners director Denis Villeneuve, who also did Sicario. And so that's, again, great director. And it's weird because I just can't imagine that universe without Ridley Scott's eye attached to it, you know what I mean? But, he will be producing it. He's been involved with the story. And the fact that the screenplay is being written by Hampton Fancher, who did the original screenplay, before David Peoples got involved, but did the original Dangerous Days script, and the original script based off of Dangerous Dream of Electric Sheep, that we have him involved. And Hampton really did some great work on that screenplay. I don't think he gets enough credit, because David Peoples is so well known in the sci-fi community. I don't think Hampton gets enough credit for what's really great in Blade Runner. So I'm very interested to see what Hampton now, 20, almost 30 years later, over 30 years later, what will his voice sound like for that script, and what will that script be like? Mm-hmm. The fact that we have Harrison Ford, we have Robin Wright, who, if you're not watching House of Cards, has just been delivering some of the best work, television, film, and otherwise. She has been, wow. And now you've got Dave Bautista. So you've got Drax the Destroyer in there, which I find very interesting. That I was very glad to see him post. Just how genuinely excited he is to be in that film. He's already working on Guardians of the Galaxy 2 right now, but the fact that there's that genuine enthusiasm. He had his Instagram picture of him holding the origami unicorn that Gaff leaves behind at the end of Blade Runner. Such a neat idea. I'm very excited to see how the film will look. My biggest question is, will it have the grit and the texture of the original film? And what makes that film so great is that so much of it is in camera. Right. Those sets really existed, and they were layered upon layered with stuff. My fear is this becomes all CG, and you lose that texture. Right. That there's a reason why you can watch Blade Runner right now, and it still looks as good, if not better, than anything you've seen out of Hollywood in the past 10 years. Because so much of it was done in camera. It was really there. I hope that there'll be that respect to the film, which, it's funny, it didn't do well in its initial release. Now it's highly regarded as one of, if not the greatest science fiction films of all time. Yeah. I'm just interested to see where the director and his crew will take this sequel. We know it's set after the original film, so Deckard is still there. Will they play up the idea that Ridley Scott was to insist on that Deckard was a replicant? or will Harrison Ford have his wish that Deckard's a human? Will we see any mentioning of Sean Young as Rachel? Will there be anything like that? I'm just very curious to see where this film will go.
Well, I mean, how many films that we love, are now films that Hollywood would never make today?
Oh Lord! Well, we'll go ahead and do a little spoiler territory. We are working on one of our next episodes. Is going to be our top 5 John Carpenter films.
Right.
And we've actually got 2 lists that we're going to put together. Our top 5 of just the films that we all know and love of John Carpenter. But then we're going to make a top 5 list that doesn't let you count the top 5 films that John Carpenter made.
Right.
Because, I mean, when you mention John Carpenter, of course, you instantly think of Halloween and The Thing and Escape from New York and Big Trouble in Little China. And he has these iconic films, They Live. But what happens if you can't mention those films and you've got to dig a little deeper into his film reservoir? What do you come back with? And so you and I have talked about that. I'm very excited about that. That will be one of our upcoming episodes, maybe even our next episode. Especially with only one film coming out next week, that might be the time to drop it.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are watching and listening, if you do have anything you want us to talk about with regards to John Carpenter films, please leave a note in the commentary below.
Right.
Let us know what you want us to talk about. Let us know what your favorite John Carpenter films are. And again, if you've seen The Jungle Book, let us know what you thought. Did you enjoy it as much as we did? Did you find it maybe not that fun? And if so, are you a robot? I don't know. But let us know your thoughts on The Jungle Book and Barbershop and any of the news that we talked about today. We'd love to hear from you, our Maniac Fanatics. Brian, before we wrap things up, anything you want to say before we head out?
Well, I'll tell you, May is coming. May is coming.
Yeah, it's not winter is coming, it's summer is coming, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So exciting stuff. So again, go see The Jungle Book, go see Barbershop, support these films. They're very worth your time.
Yes.
And we look forward to having you join us next week here on The Man Attic as we look at John Carpenter, the best films of John Carpenter. To me, you can't have a discussion about your favorite films of all time and not have some John Carpenter film in the mix. It's got to be there. For those of us of a certain age and certain time of growing up, it's as my favorite line, one of my favorite lines from Real Genius, it is a moral imperative to like John Carpenter films. So thank you for joining us once again up here in the Man Attic. Signing off for this edition of The Real Deal, I'm Kevin Polly.
And I'm Brian Hatcher.
We'll see you next week, Man Attic Fanatics. Remember, leave in the commentary below your thoughts on what we talked about today, and if you have any particular John Carpenter stuff you want us to talk about, please leave that in the stuff below. And remember, if you are following us on Facebook, please please subscribe on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter. And again, we thank you for joining us up here in the Man Attic. This has been The Real Deal with Kevin Polly and Brian Hatcher.